that were on the agenda. We're going to hit them in the order. One is Senate Bill 256. That is the first bill in your folders. This is a remnant from last year. I'm carrying the bill and I'll present it. Yes, thank you. We've only got 2 people signed up to speak on it, so we ought to be pretty quick. What you got? Thank you. Last year there was a bill that allowed any EMC with a gas subsidiary to increase the percentage of assets pledged to fund those type of business activities. As far as we know, the only EMC affected by that was Cobb EMC and their Gas South subsidiary. In the bill that passed unanimously from this committee, they had certain disclosure requirements in the event a EMC was to exceed that 15% level. And that passed the floor of the Senate unanimously as well with the consent of all parties affected. Went to the House and some of the disclosure language was stripped out, came back to the Senate, and I offered to agree as amended to reinsert our language, and that failed. And so this bill simply was to put the disclosure language back. In working with the EMCs, we've amended the language from last year to narrow the scope so that it only applies to an EMC that exceeds 15% of their assets pledged for gas subsidiaries. And I believe that that is agreeable to all the EMCs and to Gas South. It did also remove a previous disclosure requirement in the version we passed last year that made them state the consideration paid for any acquisition or the amount they paid. So that has also been removed, and it's been put in the section to make it clear it only applies to EMCs with gas subsidiaries. My understanding is out of the 41 EMCs, there's only 4 that do that, and only 1 exceeds the 15%. So I'm happy to take any questions, but I have Mr. Kevin Curtin here to speak on behalf of the EMCs and Ashley Jenkins on behalf of Gas South. So if there are no questions, I will question by Senator Albers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I represent a good portion of Cobb EMC, most of my district, which I'm proud to say is the lowest rates in the state and the most reliable. And well,
You got a question?
I appreciate your context here.
Okay.
I just don't find it necessary, seeing as they're doing a great job and they have a membership that they vote on and elect those folks that are on there. So if they have a membership that already have a governing body, why would we not just trust them to do their job?
Would you be interested to hear their views on that before making up your mind?
Sure.
All righty. Anybody else have questions? All right, Mr. Kevin Curtin on behalf of all the EMCs of Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Kevin Curtin. I'm the Senior Vice President of Government Relations for Georgia EMC. First, I wanted to start off by thanking Senator Cowsert, Chairman Cowsert, for working with us on this cleanup bill from Senate Bill 422 from last year. We think it strikes a good balance and creates additional disclosure opportunities for our members to know what their gas affiliate may be doing in the marketplace. And it affects any EMC that owns a gas affiliate that were to go above the old standard, which was the 15% standard. Now the new standard is a 25% standard in the law. So if you go over 15, under 25, these disclosures then are required of you on an annual basis to your membership. And we think that's a reasonable compromise and a good balance, and we appreciate you bringing the bill, and we are fine with it as drafted.
Does this meet with the approval of Cobb EMC that's in your group?
It does.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Curtin? All right, Ashley Jenkins from Gas South.
Good afternoon. Ashley Jenkins, Gas South. We're a wholly owned subsidiary of Cobb EMC, as the chairman pointed out. And Chairman, I just wanted to make sure we were working off LC 550571S.
That is correct.
Okay. I do want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for working with Kevin and the Georgia EMCs to get that some of the language out of here that was originally in the bill that you dropped. So Gas South is neutral on this bill as written. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Jenkins? I don't see anybody else signed up. Is anybody here from Oglethorpe Power? I have met with them. Would you like to be heard briefly, Shay?
Thank you so much. Shay
You're
Ross Smith from.
effectively like an EMC, right?
Correct. I am the Director of Government Relations for Oglethorpe Power. We are neutral on this legislation as it's written today. We're grateful for the chairman working with us. Happy to answer questions.
Am I correct that your organization already discloses this information to your members?
That's correct, yes.
So it's not imposing anything additional, new, or different from what you're already been voluntarily doing?
Correct.
All right, thank you. Any questions? All right, thanks. What's the will of the committee? Yes, sir.
Chairman, proper time I may move to pass LC 550571S.
Thank you. And a second by Senator Summers. Any further discussion or proposed amendments? All in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed, like sign? We got one no, Senator Albers. Thank you, and thank you all for working with us on this to get back to close to our original intent that accommodates the concerns of those involved. Next, we have Senator Huffstetler once again. He loves this committee. Senate Bill 194. This is in your folders. It's the second bill in there. Was the last bill on yesterday's agenda that did not get reached. You mind getting over here on camera if you'll go to witness 2 or else the podium.
Thank you, Chairman Cowser. Yeah, there were a bunch of papers here earlier, so I didn't come over here. I'm hoping this is an easy one, but, you know, you never know on these things.
Nobody signed up for or against it, but I will accept anybody that wants to talk after you.
So this is probably more important. I know there's some bourbon connoisseurs on the committee. I'm not one. But it would allow you to produce a certain amount, these specialty guys that like to do it in their own homes. And there's limitations, and if you see in your folder, there's also a bill from West Virginia. Your legislative council drew this up. This didn't come from a lobbyist or anybody like that. He drew this up mirroring their law that has a lot of protections in there that says it can't be more than 5% by an individual. It can't be more than 5 gallons by an individual, 10 gallons for a household. The beer legislation from many, many years ago was 100 gallons and 200 gallons. We mirrored them. You can't sell it. You can't offer it to the general public. You can't take it out in the general public and do it. You can't transport more than 60 ounces of it. You can't have more than 2.5 gallons produced in any 90-day period. It's got to be in a locked trunk, sealed if you do transport that 60 ounces or less. I did find out in the process, talking with DOR, that they do have to register with TTB, and they may be subject to excise tax. Apparently, there's a court decision going on that right now. So
I thought it wasn't allowed to be sold.
you even though you're not selling it, there's a challenge to say you should still pay the excise tax on it, and I'm not getting involved in that.
The DDT, did you say?
TTB, that's tobacco. What are they?
The feds.
The feds, yeah.
Okay.
So that's out of our lane that they may or may not do it. This became law last year with these identical qualifications in it in another state. And your alleged counsel drew this up, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Am I right that you're saying this is manufactured, we'll call it, or distilled within your residence, like at your home?
At your home, correct.
Okay, so it's not a place of business like a craft brewery,
No,
anything like that?
no, that's a whole different set of things. They would actually sell it. This is not for sale.
All right. Senator Gann, you got a question?
I do.
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It sure does sound like bootlegging to me, but, you know, they,
Home hooch bill.
This committee's had everything else, it seems like, this year.
I'm just thinking, said when it comes to enforcement on this, when you have a still, you know, you probably have a certain amount of production you can put through it in an hour or a day or something like that. How in the world does any, without having a search warrant and staying there with you every day, how are they gonna know how much production you're actually making and what's happening to that?
Well, there's probably some being made right now that is,
Oh, surely not. This state?
I know that would shock you, but
So you just on the honor system?
that the same as right now, correct?
Senator Albers, I recognize you for a question.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Huffstetler has been in this committee so much this year. Should we just make him an ex officio member at this point?
Let's do that with no voting powers.
Just make me come listen, I see.
You're already here.
Yep. Senator Lucas, you got a question over there. Luke? I mean, you have to have experience with this type of deal. Let's hear it.
It's all about the money.
All right, this must not be all about the money, so we'll let you go back to sleep. Okay. Anybody else got a question?
That's great.
All right. Anybody in the audience feel moved to talk about it now? I see some DOR folks out here, and I don't think the feds have swooped in yet, but okay. All right, what's the pleasure of the committee?
Would you pass?
We got a motion to pass. Is there a second? Second by Senator Sims. Any further discussion or proposed amendments to it? All right, all in favor, raise your hand, please. We'll make you be on record here. Why not? All right, it appears to be unanimous. All right. Thank you, and I'm
I
hoping
won't
that you're
return to
through with
this
our
committee.
committee for a while. You don't have anything else in front of us, do you?
No.
All right, that's good news. Okay, now let's get into today's agenda then. What y'all got first? All right, Senator Albers, on Senate Bill 122, your craft beer bill was reported out of subcommittee. I understand there was pretty thorough testimony there, and I believe you had discussed or perhaps submitted a committee substitute. Do you want that to move forward or hold that for the 2-year process? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're going to hold it. Unfortunately, we have not got consensus, even though this was brought down to the most basic thing in the world, which was being able to make a donation to a charity. I sincerely hope that in the off session that the local businesses, these small brewers, will meet with everybody in this committee and in the Senate to do what the other 49 states are doing. It's time we gave them a break. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. What did, Senator Brass, you had just a great comment the other day. I think you told Senator Summers he had a choice to kill his own bill or let y'all kill it. Is that kind of what we hear Senator Albers has chosen not to proceed?
Yeah, I mean,
before
it was a matter
crossover?
of picking which way you wanted to die.
There you go. There you go.
Turn your body to soil, or
that was-
you can be cremated.
It was an interesting day to use that phrase. I applaud your cleverness.
alkaline.
Senator Kim Jackson, Senate Bill 142. This is a committee substitute. In your file, you'll have LC 520811S. How you doing this afternoon? If you would please explain your legislation. It looks familiar.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for allowing us to bring another sub. I want to start out by saying we've worked really hard to try to come to some compromise with all interested parties around this bill so that we can move forward. I'm not sure that we're 100% there, but do know we have put in significant good faith, and we've done everything on our side to try to get to a place of reconciliation. I explained this before to this committee, but what this bill does is it creates a legal pathway for anyone who is foreign trained or internationally trained to go to medical school to be able to ultimately get a license here in the state of Georgia to be able to practice. And let me walk through this with you all just here for a moment. We'll start with our definitions because they're really important here about where a person could practice. So we have for institution, we're really clear that you have to be a federally qualified medical health center or a rural health center, a place that is obviously licensed by a medical facility. And we've added this caveat, and this was really as a result of conversations with the Medical Composite Board. And you can do this, you can work in one of these places, provided that the institution has the capacity, the personnel, and experience to educate and assess the international medical graduates, and of course that they carry medical malpractice insurance to cover them if they're employed. So this is not just any institution that you can work for. They have to be able to have the personnel, the capacity to educate and assess this person. An international medical graduate is anyone who went to medical school outside of the United States, and they have to be eligible for the Educational Commission and Foreign Medical Graduate Certificate. So for those of you who are not familiar with this area, the Educational Commission for Foreign Medical Graduates is kind of the gatekeepers, if you will. They are the ones who check and see for all of these med schools across the world. They're the ones that determine that there's some parity, that we're kind of comparing apples and apples. And so if you went to a place that is not on the list or not eligible for certification through the Educational Commission for Foreign Medical Graduates, you can't even take the tests that are listed here. So they're our first kind of stopgap measure to make sure that you didn't get your education from someplace that just is so subpar that they don't begin to even meet our requirements here in the United States for medical licensure. Limited licenses, this is actually not in order, so I'm going to come back to limited license. The first license you would be eligible for would be a provisional license. And that license would allow you to work for 2 years under supervision, again, at an institution where there's need and where there's capacity to provide some level of supervision. You could work there for 2 years, and then after 2 years, you'd be eligible for a limited license. Now, I want to be clear about this. In addition, this was one of the sticking points for I think all of us as we were working towards this. You do have to have completed a formal postgraduate training program outside the United States. In other words, you have to have done some type of residency. Now, you might hear some people say, well, is it accredited, or, how do we know whether or not your residency program was at the same level as what you would receive in the United States? Well, the reality is there are only about 20 accredited residency programs across the world in terms of what we have as a standard. And so if we limit it to only 20 of those, you're talking about eliminating the vast majority of the world. So what we've said is that you have to have had postgraduate training in a residency program or postgraduate training outside of the United States. You have to have had that. And there's a test that you will take. There's step 1 and step 2, which will help also, again, safeguard to let us know that you have the skills and the knowledge to practice safely under supervision here in the United States during your provisional years. Obviously, you can't just sit there out there and practice. You have to you have to have an employment. You have to be working full time in this capacity as well. And then in an effort to really make sure that there are all the safeguards that we could possibly put in place that we know of, you'll see on line 48, we have given the Medical Composite Board latitude to make up whatever else requirements they feel are needed and necessary in order for a person to get a provisional license. And so I want to be clear, I cannot overemphasize lines 48 and 49 in terms of the amount of latitude that is written here for the board, because we can entertain the possibility that we have not written in statute all of the things that one might need, and so we've given them that latitude. So after you've had that provisional license for 2 years, you then could either renew that for 2 years, or you can go on and take step 3 and apply for your provisional license. The provisional license is 2 years, and just like with the limited license, the provisional, now you're limited. Just with the same license, these places have to be where there's need. These are hospitals where they need somebody, we're a rural hospital or underserved hospitals. but they also have to have the personnel capacity to monitor this person, right? So you can't be working in a FSQ8 that only has nurse practitioners there. There has to be a physician, a licensed physician there that can provide that supervision. So we've put some real roadblocks in this, but also I want to remind you, this came out of the Rural Healthcare Study Committee, where we talked about the need to get more physicians, more doctors in rural Georgia. And so this helps get us there by creating this pathway. After you've completed step 3, which is this is a test that everyone takes. Like, this is not a made up thing that's specific to Georgia. Physicians all across these United States have to take step 1, step 2, step 3. We are making sure these folks take step 1, step 2, step 3 as well. And then they have to be fully employed. And again, once more, we give the board latitude to say, if the board says, before we give you your limited license, before we give you your full license, we need letters of recommendation, we need to see, we give them the latitude here in line 62 to say any other criteria the board may require is available to them. So I think the two things that I want to highlight for us as I kind of open up for questions are, one, this is meeting a real need that we have in Georgia with people who are already here in Georgia. They are here legally, and that's spelled out in the bill. That's absolutely required. They're here legally, and many of these folks have already practiced. In fact, you have to have practice within out of the last 7 years. You have had to have practiced for the last 3. But they've served in their home countries faithfully, and now they come here with those gifts and skills, wanting to share those with us here. And again, I want to be clear, they're not folks who haven't done a residency. These aren't brand new. These are folks who've been doctors, who have worked, just in a different context. So we're creating a 4-year pathway for them to get studied up on what the American healthcare system is, to understand how things work here in Georgia while they're under a certain level of supervision, and while they're practicing and getting us the needed healthcare that we need in the places where we need them to be. I think with that, I will certainly entertain questions.
You said 3 out of the last 7 years, but I thought you said they had to have practiced the last 3. In reality, they could have practiced medicine 3 years and been out of medicine for 4 and still qualify for this?
That's correct. So we're trying to make room for the reality that when people move across seas, that it can take some time to get reestablished. And there are a number of different reasons why we end up finding people in this position. So one is they've been in refugee camps, and that process just takes a long time, right? So they may have practiced for 3 years, then it's taken them 4 years to get reestablished, resettled. That's one of the ways that we end up. I also have a young man who wrote me, actually not a young man, he's a very seasoned physician who wrote me. He was practicing internationally as a physician, and his mother became ill. He returned home to Georgia to take care of her and really gave her 24-hour care while she was in her last years. And so he ended up sitting out for a substantial number of years, doing what we would hope our sons would do, right? Caring for his mother. And so his looked like he was out for several years. But we just want to acknowledge that, folks, it takes time to resettle in another country. And that might not happen in 1 year or 2 years. So there is provision for there to have been some time out of the field. And again, we're bringing them back, even if they've sat out for 4 years. When they come online, they're not fully licensed and free to go about. There's some real constraints around that. There's supervision that's involved here. They can only work in certain locations. And so we acknowledge that sitting out for a certain amount of time can mean that there's some skills that need to be built up. But we've put some real safeguards in place. Again, that step 1 test, that step 2 test is also a part of it, and the supervision. I also want to be clear, this is a part of a compromise. We started at 10 years, and we've backed all the way down to 7 years. We've worked really hard to try to come to a place where we can agree. If we lower that number much more than 7, you're going to end up with a whole bunch of people who basically their ability to continue in this career gets washed away because they sat out for 1 year too long. And that's going to be true if they sit out for 8 years, right? If they're year 8. But we're trying to get to a realistic possibility where if you were in a refugee camp or if you were just moving across seas, it takes time to get settled. And we want to make sure they don't lose that opportunity to practice in Georgia when we desperately need them by having a really short window of time when you'd be eligible.
Couple more questions from me, then I'll open it up to the committee. I remember you had a very similar bill last year. My recollection, which is not always good, was that it was just a year provisional license, and now you've doubled that and added a way to extend it 2 more.
Yeah, that's right. I think that it's always been 2 years, but I will say we've taken very seriously the feedback and the concern about making sure that these folks are able to provide a level of care that is consistent with someone who was trained in the United States. And so a 2-year provisional time period is, I think, a significant amount of time for people to invest so that they are supervised and that we can see they're in the system working, and they have to be in good standing, right? So I think that 2-year process is helpful. And as I explained in our committee session last time, I see this as being very similar to programs that we have for folks who live in the United States. I gave this example last time. You know, my brother-in-law, he went to med school, and then rural Indiana, of all places, recruited him to come and work in Indiana.
Where did he go to med school?
He went to med school in Maryland, where he was born,
So
born
he
and
wouldn't
raised.
fit this category.
No.
These are foreign.
No, this is foreign. But so he worked in rural Indiana recruited him, and they said, we will pay all of your medical school debt back if you work in rural Indiana year for year. So 4 years he had to serve, and that's how I see this. We're creating a specialized pathway for people who are foreign trained. So are they having to be in a special process for longer than most folks? Yes, but it is these are special people, so we created a special process that also ensures that we get them where we
So
need
you're
them.
relaxing the educational requirements in this year's bills from last year's? Didn't last year's require them to have attended an accredited foreign med school?
So they still have to, they do still have to attend a foreign accredited med school. And that's going to be covered by the Educational Commission Foreign Medical Graduate Certification.
Okay.
I think where the rub is, where the second is around whether or not it's an accredited residency. And again, our accredited residencies, even if is an accredited residency in another country, what accredited means to them can be vastly different than accredited means to us. And so that term, that phrase, accredited, doesn't actually get us anywhere because it's just not apples to apples. And we know that there's only 20 places, really, 20 countries or so that have accredited postgraduate places. And so that's where the difference
Senator,
is.
again, you're recognized. Did you have a question for
Yes.
Will Albers? You'll be next. Go ahead, Senator. Again,
Thank you,
you're
Mr. Chairman.
recognized.
Over the last 30 years, I've hosted 23 international students. The bad news is that they come over here and they speak more languages than I do, which isn't much, but for me, I went to eat this past Tuesday with some of my county commissioners that were down here. We went to a restaurant. One of them had ordered shrimp and ended up with chicken, and the lady had a language barrier. One of the concerns that I have in this, and what makes America great, is we all have an English language that we're supposed to be competent in. I don't see anything in the bill that addresses the English language and their ability to communicate with patients or anybody else, for that matter. And what concerns me is that, you're supposed to cut off the left arm, we cut off the right, or whatever the case may be. Help me with that,
Yeah, sure.
because I am concerned that, they may be a very competent doctor in their own language, but when they're treating people that have communication problems with them, that's the smartest doctors in the world are baby doctors and vets, because they don't ever ask their patients what's wrong.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that question. So it's really important to note there are 3 major exams that these folks will have to take before they can get a full license. These examinations are in English. They're having to pass these examinations. They're also working in the field. If their supervisor can't understand them, or if they determine that in the course of that practice that they are just having all these misses with patients because of communication issues, then they're not going to recommend them to move forward, right? And the board is is going to be aware of that. So we know that they will be conversant. By virtue of having to pass step 1 and step 2, they have to be conversant in written English just in order to pass the test. But then we have these other safeguards and steps of them being in a confined or in an institution that's working with them for 2 years that would be able to kind of raise those issues, right?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Jackson. I think this is a very noble effort, by the way, so I want to commend you on that. I do a lot of work with the Composite Medical Board, and in talking to them, I still think there are some areas that they're not 100% clear on. So my question would be is, are you willing to spend the off session to clear that up so we can make sure we have a good comprehensive bill? Because I've got a pretty lengthy list of amendments here that I was not able to share with the chairman prior, and I know he's got a pretty hard and fast rule of doing that a day before.
Yeah, so I want to be clear about this. We introduced this bill last year, walked through the process. We spent the entire interim working on this bill. We've worked with lots of different folks, including the Medical Composite Board. I have put in significant good faith effort to get to a place where we can all agree. Fundamentally, I am happy. I will continue to work on it as much as necessary, but I want to be clear that I have put in the time and the energy to get us to a place. And we've invited the Medical Composite Board to the table time and time again. We continue. At some point, they've got to meet us too, because we're trying to create a program that you see that exists in Tennessee, in Florida, and Virginia. Our international medical graduates are going to neighboring states, and they are working and providing medical care there because we are not able to get a program up and standing. And so if we want to meet the needs and demands of Georgia, we need to do this now, and it's not going to be able. I cannot meet all of their demands, and we still have a functioning program, because we've tried to do that, and we've worked in good faith very hard to compromise. And I think they would testify to that we've tried to meet all of their demands. And I can give you a whole list of amendments that we've made over the course of time to try to get to that place.
And Senator, I would tell you, nobody would doubt your passion and your thoroughness in any committee that you're in front of, and I appreciate working with you and those. There's been some leadership changes for the very positive in the Composite Medical Board. So I think that, and I've done a little research on what happened in Tennessee, and that was pretty much a disaster. So I think what we want to do is want to make sure that in the effort of doing something good, which I think you have, is we don't go to a place that maybe has gone in the wrong direction either. So that would be my suggestion to you, because I would love to help you on this bill.
I get what you're trying to do, and essentially you're trying to utilize foreign-trained doctors to service the underserved areas of Georgia. Well, that's a euphemism for rural Georgia, because we got more than we can stand in Atlanta metro and the big cities. What I don't want to see is that those areas get substandard medical care because their doctors are not as rigorously trained as our U.S. trained doctors. And I've been hearing concerns both from senators within the Senate and other people, and that's a worry. I think we need to let the Georgia Composite Medical Board be heard. Do I have anybody? I think Kimberly, were you here? If you would take that podium, let's hear your thoughts and see if this is a agreed upon compromise or not.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Committee, and thank you for letting me be heard on this bill. So just to clarify one point, the first time that the Composite Medical Board was brought into this conversation, our first meeting on this was January 3rd. So that was our first interaction in regards to this particular bill. So the board actually does still have some concerns, even with the substitute that's here. This program, as you stated, places physicians in our rural communities, which are our underserved communities with some of our most vulnerable population. The board wants to make sure that we do not create two tiers of physicians in this state. We don't want to hold IMGs to a lower standard of education than we hold our U.S. trained doctors. So in regards to this, the Federation of State Medical Boards, which is a national organization over all state medical boards, have actually created guidelines. They've created 9 guidelines in place that are posted publicly. So the board tried to provide recommendations that followed those guidelines. So in regards to that, one of the things that the Federation says is that it's extremely difficult for boards to assess the differences in the residencies, because some countries don't have residencies at all, and some countries, their residencies are not what we would consider a residency. It might just be shadowing. It might be lower supervision. So there's a lot of differences that need to be looked at, and boards just really don't have the resources because there's no nationally recognized organization that assesses all of these different residency programs and can tell medical boards, yes, this one complies with US, or no, this one doesn't. The boards would have to do that on their own. So they would have to get the documents from each one of these applicants in regards to the residency programs. They would have to get the residency's curriculum to then determine whether or not the residency is substantially comparable to a US residency. So that was the board's reasoning for wanting that accredited language in there, because that at least gives you a little bit of a leg up, knowing that there is some form of a formal body that is accrediting that program. That program has to meet some form of a standard. So that was their sticking point on that. Another one is they really wanted the first 2 years of that provisional license to be within a teaching institution, because if they're not able to discern whether or not the training is substantially similar to US, they would like those individuals in a teaching institution so that they are under supervision that would be similar to like what a resident would have. They would have a doctor shadowing them to ensure that all of their care is up to standard. The U.S. healthcare system, from what I understand, and I am not a doctor, the U.S. healthcare system, from what I understand, is extremely complex, and these individuals were not trained here. So there's no guarantee that these people actually understand the complexities of the U.S. healthcare system. So that is another concern of the board. So that's why we wanted them in a teaching institution for the first 2 years, because they would get that support to be trained into the healthcare system. Another sticking point was the last 3 of 7 years, time out of practice. Time out of practice for a U.S.-based doctor, a U.S.-based doctor is only allowed to be out of practice for 30 months before they have to sit for another examination to assess their skills. So that's kind of why the board recommended 3 of the past 5, because that would keep all of these applicants within that time frame. So that would make them comparable to the U.S. It wouldn't put them outside of that same time frame for a U.S. doctor. Because why are we going to bench a U.S. doctor at 30 months, but we're going to allow an international medical graduate to come in if they haven't practiced in 4 years?
Any other questions? Senator Dolezal, you're recognized.
Thank you. I understand what the senator is trying to do and conceptually strongly support the idea, and understand that you guys want to make sure that we don't have a two-tiered medical system, which I think she probably would agree with as well. Does the step 1 and step 2, this test that she's referencing, does that give you guys any visibility into knowledge and competency? Would it be helpful if the step 3 was moved up a level to be in the initial step before they were allowed to come in?
So step 1 and step 2 are usually taken by medical students before they even graduate medical school. That's just to assess their base knowledge of medicine.
Okay.
Step 3 is more, they take that when they're in residency. So after they've been in residency for a couple years, they take step 3. That's usually the hardest step for them to pass because it does have to do with the clinical practice.
So would it make sense then before the initial, I'm losing track of these terms, but essentially before that first placement that they have, if before the first placement they did step 1, 2, and 3, would that assuage any of the concerns that you have around? Because I understand her pushback on the accreditation piece too. If that limits the pool significantly, that's problematic. Is there not some assessment that we can do here stateside to get to the core of the competency of the provider?
I mean, you can do steps 1, 2, and 3 all before the provisional license. I don't know how long that'll take them.
Okay.
That's something that, like I said, the U.S. residents usually do over a span of a couple years.
Okay.
Other questions? Senator Harbison?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for my understanding, and if it's proper, if a citizen were to travel to another area, what kind of standard, she mentioned a couple of international standards, would those doctors be operating under if we were traveling abroad, as an example? Could we be assured that they are under the same standard that we're discussing now, if that doctor was trained in, I don't know, Brazil or Argentina, Africa, wherever, if he's a doctor or she's a doctor, is that the standard they would be measured if they were to transfer here, regardless of whether they had been recently working or that has been there, they took a break or something of that? I'm just trying to get a understanding of the continuity of the standards.
So there really is no continuity of standards across countries. So the U.S. is usually considered more of the gold standard in medical education. So the U.S. usually compares, there are a couple organizations that compare the schools. So that's the school that gives them their MD diploma versus their residency. So those are two separate pieces of the education. So the board does actually have a list of approved schools that actually have been listed as substantially similar to U.S. education, but we've been told that that list is too narrow for this program.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right, any further questions? I have one more. Did I?
Yeah.
You had, oh, yes, go right ahead. Senator Jones, you're right.
Hearing some of the issues, my question then becomes, would your lines 48 through 49 and the other line where it talks about the board may require, if your bill was to move forward and these issues were deemed to be, serious and something need to be addressed, would those lines, though, give that board the power to kind of address these issues that are being presented today?
Yeah, so in my initial read-through of this bill, I talked about there is significant latitude for the board to implement rules and procedures in process. And I will say that in full transparency, I've put that in there multiple times against the advice of advisors who would rather that not happen because they're concerned about roadblocks that would be put up. But we have given the board significant latitude multiple times along the way in order to put in whatever safety checks they feel like are necessary.
All right, Senator Harbison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Once again, I just wanted to pause and make sure that I commend you for the great exhausting work and the dedicated passion you have for bringing this issue forward, especially to address those deserts that we are not covering as it relates to medical care. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
All right, I got one more speaker. You got a few minutes?
Running on time.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, just because I know some of us has to leave for other events in our district, I echo what Senator Harbison just said. I appreciate it, but I personally am not comfortable enough to continue the conversation at this point, knowing that the Composite Medical Board has a series of things, and bowing to the yielding of your rules, I think it makes sense to push on.
Ma'am, do you think it would help you to continue talking with Senator Jackson to try to reach a common ground? Would you like time to continue working through these issues?
We would.
I think that I'm going to withhold action on the bill today then, but I'm going to ask you to please get with Senator Jackson. I know y'all had a kind of a late start. She's one of the more thorough legislators we have, and she is very savvy to the rules as a minority whip. Last year, we found another vehicle during session and were able to move her bill, at least out of the Senate. And I'll continue to work with y'all as well, and we'll find a way to continue this discussion, and we'll be able to bring it back if we need to flesh out more here so that this committee, junior varsity compared to Senator Brass's committee, will be able to have an opinion on it. And anybody else signed up, if you will, just hold. We'll hold action on this one today due to the shortness of time and your commitment to continue working with her, okay?
Yes, sir.
I feel like since you are the Georgia Composite Medical Board, you're in charge of physician competency for our state, that I want to make sure y'all are comfortable with it, but don't be obstinate. You don't have to, you have to agree to everything they ask for, Senator Jackson, but I think we'll have better public policy if we do that. Thank you so much for being here.
Appreciate that, sir. Thank you.
All right, next bill, Senate Bill 221. Is Senator Still present? Did we let you know in time to get you ready for this? All right, proceed. You have the floor. If you want to just take this witness chair, we'll let you explain your bill. It didn't appear to be too complicated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. Good to see y'all. This, on the surface, would appear to be a bill about increasing regulation. It does do that, but for a very, very specific reason, actually two specific reasons. So Senate Bill 221, working off of LC 550453, the only thing that we are doing is changing line 12, going from 500 hours to 625 hours. There are two reasons why. To my right is Ms. Patty Glenn. She is a national expert from the Federation of State Massage Therapy Boards, and she's here just as an expert witness from Kansas to answer any questions you may have. But the reasons why this is so important. Number one, it gets our state licensing board up to a national standard. Why do we need to be at a national standard? A couple of reasons. Number one, it makes it much easier for people transferring in or out in that career field to be able to do so without any red tape. The second reason, which is far more important in my opinion than just the job portion, is on the subject of human trafficking. By raising the hours on this, it makes it far more difficult for illicit massage parlors to be able to operate and be able to certify people. This raises the bar. It makes it much harder to achieve a license, to create a level of professionalism within that arena to ensure that everyone who's doing massage therapy is nationally certified, and raises the bar to that standard. Every one of the state associations boards is moving to this standard, so we're just trying to get Georgia up to that same standard, and I can let Ms. Glenn add to that as well.
Thank you. Chair Cowser, members of the committee. My name is Patty Glenn. I am the Director of Education and Professional Mobility with the Federation of State Massage Therapy Boards. And there's just one other piece that I would like to add to this, and that is an issue that we're seeing currently, outstanding rule with the Department of Education on a potential rules change regarding federal financial aid and education that is certificate granting rather than terminal degree granting. So previously, in the last 30 years that I've been in this profession, the Department of Education has allowed schools to teach up to 150% of the state minimum hours in the regulation. With this bill, it would change that to 100%. So in a sense, the schools that are out there currently teaching, all but one of which have programs approved at over 625 hours in Georgia, would be reduced or forced to reduce their programs down to a 500-hour minimum. Where that creates a burden on Georgians is the fact that Pell Grant eligibility, a minimum of 600 hours is required. So if the rule was to go through, and in fact Georgia schools would have to reduce their curriculum to 500 hours, they would no longer be able to offer Pell Grant for federal financial aid. So it's a significant potential hardship to Georgians.
Are you saying that this bill would force them to reduce their hours?
No. This bill would raise Georgia's hours to that 625-hour threshold that aligns with something called the Entry-Level Analysis Project that was done 12 years ago. That program established a minimum number for public safety. That minimum number was this 625. But because federal financial aid laws allowed up to that 150%, states didn't have to open their practice acts to change those minimum hours. They just did it in practice. And so we're facing this issue potentially for schools that would force them to drop to what the current Georgia minimum is if we don't raise that Georgia bar today. So this has a positive impact on Georgians and Georgia schools, not a negative one.
I don't see how it forces them to drop. If they want to voluntarily offer a 625-hour program, we don't prevent that.
We don't currently prevent that, but that Department of Ed rule, where it pertains to Title IV funding and federal financial aid, they will no longer approve programs that exceed the federal or the state minimum requirement. And so since Georgia's law currently states 500 hours, that would therefore require that Georgia schools offer programs at 500 hours, not 501. So in agreement with you, sir, we've always seen regulated professions, and that number set in statute has been a minimum number that schools must meet. We've never expected that to be a maximum number that schools have to meet. And if this rules change at the Department of Ed were to go through, that would put a very different look on those hours.
If those rules change.
Yes, sir.
So we're in a red tape rollback phase of state and federal government. This seems to be adding more rules and regs or more more training. I don't know how many hundreds of hours it takes somebody to learn how to give a massage. I don't mean that to be smart alecky, but I don't think that these are really, it's not medical treatment, is it?
Understood. In most states, actually, sir, it is considered medical. Not every state considers it that way. Some do consider it to be a service. But in most states, it is considered a medical profession and oftentimes combined with medical boards.
Okay.
So,
Questions from committee members? Senator Dolezal.
I think you have, at least, yeah, I'll speak for myself. I'm confused.
that's okay. I apologize, sir.
That's okay. So, right now, there's you have this list of schools on the second page of the handout you gave us, and all but 2 have a greater than 600-hour program. There's 2 that currently have a 500-hour. You're anticipating a rule change from the feds that would require what exactly?
So it was intended to be implemented in July of last year. There was a rules change put forward by the Department of Ed to remove the 150% rule. That rule allowed schools to teach and be eligible for federal financial aid up to 150% of that state minimum, so essentially 750 hours in Georgia. And you've seen the schools utilize that space to teach their programs in a way they feel is appropriate for massage therapy education. If this rule were to go through, which is currently being challenged, but could go, has the potential to still be put into effect, it would require that federal financial aid only, the minimum would become the maximum, essentially.
Okay. I think I've stumbled onto what's happening. So
Thank you, sir.
Let me say it in my words.
Thank you.
All right.
And you have a bunch of schools right now that are getting students at greater than 600 hours. There is some federal funding that helps pay for that. Did you say it's only Pell Grants?
So it's all federal funding, but Pell Grant eligibility specifically is not eligible for short-term programs, and that would be any program under 600 hours.
Okay. So if the rule goes through, the financial aid is still available, but it's only going to be available for 500 hours, which means these schools are going to be able to do, are going to be forced to do a 500-hour program, which ultimately means less money to the school. And is that why we're here today?
We're not here about the money, sir. We're here about competency in massage profession.
Okay.
The other issue you'll hear about would be the Interstate Massage Compact. That'll be coming over your way from the House later this session. And that is a compact, I think you have 9 enacted here in Georgia, that would allow massage therapists to work across state boards. The profession of massage took a significant hit during COVID and also with some other challenges about a decade ago in the school's environment. So we have a reduced capacity of therapists in this country with a significantly increasing demand. So
Don't you think that's partially due to the fact that it takes, in some of these places, 750 hours of school?
unfortunately, a lot of schools have already closed this year due to the concern of this coming forward. So we're trying to help prevent that and to create a mobile workforce that brings more energy and revenue into Georgia, supports your local spas and massage establishments, and assisting Georgians when they want to go work in another state, or they need to support their families or maybe a child or aging parents, that they can immediately go to work. An example doesn't apply to Georgia right now, sir, but the West North Carolina disaster that we saw this year, where a number of people and communities were displaced outside of their state. The Interstate Massage Compact that you'll hear about that requires a 625 minimum hour participation would have allowed them to go to work immediately in any other compact state.
So
we're
what's going to
bringing
happen
you
with the
into
if this
alignment.
happens, though, what's going to happen with the compact? Essentially, you would anticipate every state then changes to the 6 whatever so that federal
Most-
funding matches. Is that?
Last year, 9 states that were still below that threshold already increased that, and there's legislation in a number of states
Okay.
this year. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Anybody else signed up to speak? I'd love to hear somebody from Massage Envy or somewhere on the front lines.
I got one question, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Senator Summers, you're recognized for a question.
Thanks, sir. Thank you, Chairman. What is the cost of someone taking 723 hours of schooling to become a massage therapist? What is that?
It varies significantly across the country, whether it's a private or
We're
funded
talking about Georgia,
program.
though. I'm just talking about Georgia.
I don't have that number, I'm sorry, sir. I would guesstimate it's probably about $12,000 or somewhere in that range, but that is an absolute ballpark guess on my part.
Is that, I mean, if I'm math correct, that's roughly 15 weeks of normal work to get you to the time of 600 hours, whatever. I mean, is that the norm? Is that what they go through? They get paid during that time? They pay you?
Typically spread out over a year. I'm not paid.
I
I
know,
represent
but-
the state board.
Yeah, pay the.
No, it is, they are working in school, learning anatomy, physiology, kinesiology, and then also from a regulatory perspective, ethics, business, boundaries. These are individuals who work in a room with an individual who's unclothed in a very vulnerable position. And so that aspect of the minimum level of education to this profession has been important, sir.
Sure. You're
So
recognized.
Florida's at 500 hours, is that correct?
They are still at 500
Is there,
hours.
where are they at in changing?
They had a bill last year, sir, and I do not know about this coming session since it's just starting.
Can you speak to any of the other, like, maybe the southeastern states in general? I see that Alabama is at 650.
I apologize, sir. I do not have that list in
That's
front of
okay.
me. And
No
I know
problem.
that
I
your
can-
time is precious today, so I hate to take the committee's
No
time.
worry.
Other questions? All right, let me let the author sum up anything else you'd like to say, Senator Steele.
I just appreciate everyone's time. As Patty said, there is a compact bill that did pass the House, so it's going to be coming over, and we're going to have to take that up, and this is just an extension of that.
Does that include this issue in that compact bill?
No, Mr. Chairman.
We would be bound by
they're
the
parallel.
compact's rules, though, if they deemed it 650 hours?
Sorry, thank you, sir. There are two sets of requirements in the compact. The state's requirements, which say that the state must have education, and then the individual's requirement, which is a 625 hours. So that would be addressed through core education and continuing education for individuals licensed in the state prior to the implementation of the compact. But again, it would be the desired outcome to have the standards be consistent so that it would be seamless for Georgians who desire to have that access to mobility.
Am I right that this is only needed if that federal standard changes? You're concerned that it may change? Just wonder if we're getting the cart ahead of the horse here or not.
So it aligns with the minimum standards that were already established over a decade ago. But again, board states reluctant to open practice acts unless it's necessary. And since the current language has always read a minimum of, the schools have raised their curriculum, as you saw in the numbers, to meet that established outcome from this entry-level analysis project. So I know it's a little bit complicated, and I apologize for that.
All right, what's the will of the committee? Got a motion to pass from Senator Alpers. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Senator Jones. Any discussion or proposed amendments? All right, all in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, same sign. All right, passes unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Adam Vitarte, do you mind if I skip you? I'll come back to you, but I've got, Senator Walker has the longest travel distance, and he's promised he can be very quick. So we'll call Senate Bill 239.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. I appreciate you all giving me the time to bring this to you today. Licensure, this is a licensure bill, and I've been on a, kick to try to eliminate barriers to work in Georgia through various licensure bills, and I think this is another good one. It's a subject matter we've dealt with in the past, and I hope we can get it handled this time. It deals with funeral directors and funeral homes and the licensure for embalmers and funeral directors. Under current code, you have to be both an embalmer and you have to do embalming to be a funeral director. You have to be trained and licensed as an embalmer to be a funeral director. The biggest thing that this bill does is it will segregate that into two separate licenses. Over 50%, in 2024, over 50% of the people in Georgia were cremated, and so we're seeing a trend for less and less embalming, and there are people that are wanting to get into the funeral business and be funeral directors that do not want to be an embalmer. It'd be like somebody wanting to be a family doctor, and not want to do surgery, that type of concept. I think the licensure for funeral directors was established in 1976, and there's been very little change to that since then. I think that's 46 or so, 48 years ago, 46 years ago. So this is kind of an omnibus cleanup bill and removing the requirement to be an embalmer to be a funeral director. I can kind of just give you the sections, what they do, in a quick format, or if you like.
That'd be great, yeah.
So section 1.1 updates definitions. Section 2.2 states that it'll be unlawful to engage in embalming and funeral directing without complying with the article, and any person who engages or participates in the profession shall be considered a funeral director and must be licensed. Section 3.1 gives additional penalty if you're practicing without a license. Section 4.1 changes the makeup of the board, licensure board, adds a 7th member. 3 would be funeral directors, 3 would be embalmers, and the 7th one would be somebody that was both a funeral director and embalmer. Section 5.1 deals with the regulations for the practice of embalming and funeral directing. Section 6.1 talks about how to apply for a license. Section 7.1 relates to the qualification requirements to be an embalmer or a funeral director, updates that. The next section has to do with the unlicensed practice of funeral directing and embalming. Then we have more on defining unlicensed practices of public nuisance. We have a section dealing with the powers and duties of the board. Section on the examination requirements, separating the examination requirements for funeral directors and embalmers, and revising the application procedures. 7.1, I think, updates educational and apprenticeship requirements. 8.1, I think, is reciprocity and examination. We have a section on reinstate, how do you get your license reinstated? And then really the last section is what speaks to the disposition of cremated remains. So it's really just a lot of cleanup, a lot of clarification, a lot of updates, and separating the requirement that you be both a funeral director and a embalmer.
Questions, Senator Walker, anybody?
Yeah, I got.
What number are you down there, Miss Luke? 11?
So do you in the funeral home business?
I'm not in the funeral home business, no, sir, but I've worked on a lot of our occupational licensing legislation over the last 3 years to try to streamline it and eliminate barriers to work for Georgians.
Under this bill, normally what I found that if you were a funeral director, you had to have an embalmer's license.
Yes, sir.
So you're separating this out now that you could be a funeral director and not be an embalmer.
Yes, sir.
What, in being a funeral director, what education process would you go through?
Let me see, it's spelled out in the bill. I'd have to find it. There are some industry people here, Senator Lucas, that probably could speak to that.
Well, one sitting right behind.
Better.
I'll be glad to speak to it.
Would tell her.
Chairman, is that okay?
Come on, here, Senator, number 3 there, right quick light. And this does say on line 227, you got to be a good moral character. That ought to cover it, right?
That's right. That's
Just
right.
wanna make sure.
And up until 1976, you could be a funeral director by just working 3 years apprenticeship, taking a state board test. And if you pass, then you could become a funeral director. In 1976, they changed it, so you had to be an embalmer to be a funeral director. What this bill, and we actually brought in Patty Hutchison, who's former president of Gupton Jones Mortuary College here in Atlanta, and Barry Turner, who's president of Ogeechee Tech in Statesboro, that has their mortuary science program. And what they did, they divided it up into the arts and the science, meaning you could go through the arts program and become just a funeral director. And you could go ahead and take the science part and become an embalmer also, if you wish to. As Chairman Walker stated, in 1976, roughly 50 years ago, there were 3 crematories in Georgia: Atlanta, Macon, Columbus. Now there's probably, I think, over 150 crematories in Georgia. The cremation rate is well over 50% in Georgia. Fewer and fewer embalmings. We have a lot of trade embalmers, as we always have, that go funeral home to embalm. To be an embalmer, you don't go to medical school. You go to a vocational technical school. So it's a trade. So it's not diminishing or lessening the education requirements to be a funeral director or embalmer. But what it's saying is you could be a family physician and not do orthopedic surgery. You don't have to do surgery. You can call in a surgeon to do that part.
Let me ask you this. Representative Bentley, whose family been in the funeral home business, and
She
her
is in
husband died.
favor of this bill.
Is she considered a funeral director? I don't think she's an embalmer.
No, she's not an embalmer, and she's not a funeral director. But she could very easily complete the courses to become a funeral director. And she and I have worked on this for several years together, and she is in favor of this bill.
Mr. Chairman, question, please.
Sure.
Have you noticed we've gotten a lot more funeral and embalming bills since Senator Rick came over from the House there and joined us? It's like every day we get a good bill in here about embalming and funeral.
Well, I could make you an honorary member of the funeral caucus if you would like.
The funeral caucus.
Any
We
other
have little
questions?
Hearst lapel pins.
All right, we got a couple of people to talk real quick. Scott Young. You can take that podium, be ideal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name's Scott Young. I'm the president of SCI Georgia Funeral Services, the largest provider of death care services in Georgia as well as North America. We are here to adamantly support this legislation. I am a funeral director. I just celebrated my 50th year in this industry. We've seen it change dramatically. We appreciate what Senator Walker and Senator Williams have completed and proposed, and stand completely in support. We've seen the cremation rate grow over 50%, as they articulated, as well as the one thing we don't talk about are religious constraints that do not embalm. And that takes that rate much, much higher. So that may change, it may not, but cremation's growing at about 150 basis points a year. So with that, I know time is the essence. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? All right, don't see anyone. Last speaker, Cy Hume.
Good afternoon. I'm back again. I was here yesterday. Thank you. I echo everything Senator Williams just said. I was also assisted in writing this parts of this bill as well. And one thing that I want to point out, it does not loosen any of the educational requirements to be either a funeral director or an embalmer or to be both. But one thing it doesn't, and another thing it doesn't do, as being, I'm the owner of A.S. Turner and Sons Funeral Home here in Atlanta. We're probably one of the largest funeral homes independently owned in the state, or especially in the metro area, where our cremation rate is about 72% right here in Atlanta. But what it also doesn't loosen is the fact that I'm what's known as an FDFCC, which is Funeral Director in Full and Continuous Charge. That person still has to be dual licensed. He can't just be a funeral director. So these funeral directors that you're just licensing under this, if this bill is passed, the people that choose just to be a funeral director, they're still working under a dual licensed person, to where they're being governed and watched by that person, because it's my butt on the line, not theirs, at the end of the day. So I fully support this bill and fully support it being passed. Thank you.
Could I just?
Thank you. You could close up for us if you'd like to, if Senator Walker would cede to you to do it.
Thank you. Right now, there's 28 states that have split the license, and every state that touches Georgia has split the license. And this is also in tune with the governor's Get to Work program. If you have veterans move into Georgia from Florida or a neighboring state, they may be a funeral director in that state, but they can't practice in Georgia because they're not an embalmer. To give you an example of how out this is, I had a funeral director that worked for us. He failed to renew his license by only about a month. He goes to the State Board of Funeral Service wishing to renew his license, and rather than just charging a renewal fee and renewing his license or a late fee, they told him, nope, you got to go to mortuary college, be an embalmer before we can renew your license. The man was 72 years old, and this was about 20 years ago. He's not going to mortuary college. So it reduced his ability to make a fair living. And so what we're doing is helping people get to work and making a livable salary. I do ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you very much.
All right, what's the will of the committee?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to do pass if I get a hearse pen.
Got a motion to pass.
About a tie.
I'll second, but I don't want to hurst.
Second. Now, let's be clear what we're on here. We're on Senate Bill 239 LC 550528. Any further discussion or proposed amendments? All right, all in favor, raise your hand. And are there any opposed? Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Pass unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you for your patience, Senator Anna Batarte. If you want to present Senate Bill 229, and let me make sure, so I got some people holding here. You are also the author of the next bill on our list, Senate Bill, is that 293? Don't have my glasses, 203? Am I correct that you've decided to hold action on that consumer solar bill until it's been more thoroughly vetted or worked out?
Yeah, that's correct, Mr. Chairman, unless
All
the
right.
crowd that follows me everywhere wants to stay here.
Well, I just wanted to let that crowd know, so they don't have to stay on a Friday afternoon. That bill,
I mean, it's up to y'all.
we're going to hold it. It was thoroughly heard in subcommittee to allow the testimony. And I understand that the subcommittee recommendation was to return it to the full committee with no recommendation. So that sounds like the type of bill that needs a little more development, consensus building, perfection. So we got a 2-year biennial, and we'll save that for a little bit later, and we'll keep our eyes out to see what might pass the House to give you more opportunity on that one. But we'll hear this Senate Bill 229 now. I'm going to let you talk about it. I'm going to mention that my sidekick here, Senator Summers, has filed a bill in the same subject matter, and it has a different approach than yours. Yours, as I understand it, prevents liquor stores or liquor distributors from distributing the hemp beverages. His permits it. And so I'm kind of thinking this is going to be something we're going to be talking about. I'm going to give you a hearing here. There's some people signed up so we can get educated, but I may withhold action on this one as well. But you hadn't been vetted yet, you hadn't been heard, so proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thank you for the opportunity, and I will say just up front, I do think this bill is better than my friend from Crisp County, so we'll see how this turns out.
All right.
I think I appreciate you, Mr. Vice Chairman. So I bring Senate Bill 229 to you today because of a few things I'm concerned about. The uncontrolled growth of hemp drinks in our community, the concern that distributors are engaged in this business should not be, and their engagement is hurting local businesses, including industries we've heard recently around the craft brewery industry. There are over 400 hemp beverage brands nationally, and it's growing, and I do thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your hard work yesterday and the product show and tell that stole all my thunder today. I wish you had brought all this back today, but I think you made your point yesterday with a few of those
I assure you they didn't
things.
Disappear. They've not been consumed yet.
Oh, I
They've
hope
got in
not.
office for show and tell.
We'll need to
if you
talk
it.
afterwards. Few of these brands are from Georgia, and they are really from an out-of-state and international source in many cases. The largest beer wholesaler in Georgia is distributing over 12 different hemp brands. And I can't tell you honestly how many are being distributed in Georgia because some wholesalers are not advertising it, but others are sending out press releases about how excited they are to distribute hemp drinks. I'm not really in favor of these products being legal in the first place, but if they are, their access needs to be limited. Alcohol wholesalers are incredibly efficient and successful at what they do, and that worries me, that they would make these drinks that are, on every corner and every corner store in our community. I'm also concerned that allowing them to distribute these products, we are mixing two things that should not be together. The law we passed last year explicitly says that hemp and alcohol cannot be in the same beverage. The Department of Revenue has also said liquor stores cannot sell these products because they don't go along with alcohol. I fail to see then why wholesalers of alcohol should be in the business of hemp either, given that these two things are true. Finally, wholesalers have a specific mission as a part of their agreement with the state under the three-tier system to distribute alcohol efficiently and effectively. We are seeing the craft breweries close left and right, and over the last 15 years, it just becomes harder to see where wholesalers are not taking advantage of the new law to focus their attention on distributing hemp drinks to the detriment of local breweries. Long-term breweries we've seen are seeing a decrease in distributors ordering beverages. I know, and I've been before this committee in terms of decline we've seen with, some beer sale, craft brew sales, bourbon sales, whiskey sales, which is kind of a national thing, and it seems like the only thing that's going up in sales are hemp beverages. In closing, if you like hemp beverages, you should like this bill. It doesn't prohibit them. There are wholesalers who specifically distribute hemp products and non-alcoholic products. There are wholesalers, those same wholesalers will still be able to distribute these beverages. If you're skeptical about hemp beverages like me, then this should relieve your concerns about their growth in the market happening way too fast. If you believe in the three-tier system, you should also like this bill. It will refocus wholesalers and get them back to the basics. It reinforces the mission and purpose of the players in the three-tier system. It also would make all levels consistent by wholly separating hemp and alcohol. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity.
Any questions from committee members? Senator Lucas, you're recognized.
Now, I just understand, my understanding of what you said was we need to watch out for all these hemp drinks. But as we saw, the chairman brought a bunch of cans in here with different hemp products and THC, which the thing I would assume that we've been questioned about how high can you go with the THC. If that is the case, then most certainly we need to pass some law and regulation based on, I would assume, scientific or medical information about the THC in a drink that you can go buy at the convenience store.
That's right.
So, do you have a bill that gets to the bottom of this whole discussion? I mean, it's.
Yeah,
Oh, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I thought you were drinking a hemp drink.
Let me double check.
Check your cans,
I
friends.
love you, Brother Lucas.
You know,
Yes, sir.
It's gotten to be a big business, is what I'm saying.
Yes, sir.
And methodically, we're going to have to do something when you hear medical folks talk in the terms they talk about and what these drinks, based on how high the THC is, as far as your minds and stuff. Because, I mean, for tobacco, you got to be carded. In other words, you got to look more than 21 years old, or you get carded. And so it's kind of hard to put it. We're dealing with a product that we started dealing with and setting laws for and how you operate in the state. And now we're looking at products coming from out of state that are in convenience stores that people are buying and they're drinking, and people are talking about the THC and how high can the THC be?
Yeah, I'll say to my friend from Macon, I think a lot of what you said is spot on. I mean, I think what we learned yesterday was these drinks are with energy drinks on grocery store shelves. I don't dare to ask anybody on this committee if they've ever seen like a block of marijuana. But I'll tell you, back in the day, you know, where I came from, working with our local police department, and seizing drugs on off of Buford Highway, you know, this reminds me of a block of marijuana, basically, you know, of the liquid version, showing up in convenience stores or being around town that you can access, especially if, you know, there's 20 milliliter drinks or 25 or 50, Mr. Chairman, that are coming from out of state. You know, my concern is that I think, you know, this committee did a great job setting up a regulatory system with our agriculture commissioner, which I think most of us, if not all of us, would agree with. But my concern is because of the, you know, kind of dialing up of these hemp drinks just over the last, you know, 18 to 24 months, because of the economic conditions of, you know, the various different industries. You know, we're moving into an arms race where, you know, we need to get this product out faster because, you know, as you would say, it's all about the money. And that's what I think a lot of these stores and individuals or people who want to go stand up a new three-tier system, at the end of the day, it's all about money. It's not, you know, if, you know, somebody here probably drank one of these, we probably need to take you down to Grady Hospital, and I don't know if you'd ever get out. But I think that's kind of the bigger picture here is, you know, us keeping the system we have in place, you know, being cognizant of any sort of, you know, new growth in that system, and I think being mindful that, you know, the work that our retail friends or folks are doing, you know, we'd be smart about it.
Senator Summers, recognize you.
I hear something else. Here's some outside music here.
There's some music coming from the sky.
Okay, let me
check your water bottles.
Senator Avatari, I appreciate where you're coming from, but I'm going to give you my thing. I'll have to leave you. I'm sorry, I got another appointment.
You're okay.
First of all, we just a few minutes ago voted to let people make their own stills in Georgia. In other words, you make your own liquor, you make your own still, you can drink all you want to drink, do your thing. I mean, here we are regulating something else. My position is very simple. question to you is, why would we allow convenience store to sell it, or or grocery store to sell it, or other stores for that matter to sell it, and not allow a liquor store where they really have to check and make sure the checks and balance systems are there? And personally, I think that's where it ought to be sold, and that type of thing. So I want you to.
I mean, in the free market, I mean, if we're going to have a free market conversation, I mean, I think there are elements to what you're saying that are true. But I do think at the same time, though, if we're going to talk about, limiting a dangerous product, we're basically putting liquid marijuana on the store shelf.
Well,
There's a big difference between, Coke Zero and liquid marijuana.
Mr. Chairman, I'll go one step further.
right ahead.
There has been no one died or overdosed that I can find in any of my research from marijuana. I challenge anybody to find it. It's not out there. I can tell you thousands upon thousands die every year of alcohol poisoning or alcohol-related stuff. So, I mean, I think we're regulating something that's not a real problem. And I'll tell you one more thing about this, in my opinion, if I may, Mr. Chairman. People get drunk. They go, 8 out of 10 of them will go home and beat mama or beat the children. If people get on a drink and have a good feeling, they either go to bed and want something to eat, or be happy. I don't see people getting that way. So I'm really concerned that we're trying to regulate something that is not needing regulating. Personally,
Well, I mean, I think, in all due respect to your comments, I mean, I think yesterday, I mean, it's very clear, under Georgia statute, I mean, if this is in your system, you're driving, you get pulled over, you're walking down the street, I mean, you're going to jail. I mean, we can get into instances too. I mean, heck, my brother was killed by a drunk driver. So I think just to say that, this is a little bit more than putting a little bit more, bourbon in your Coke or Makers in your Coke or something like that. I mean, we're literally putting a lethal drug in, mixed in with lemonade or whatever, and, proliferating it.
Last question.
I think that's the difference.
Last comment, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
We could limit it all day long right here. We could probably say it's not allowed, take it down to 1%, and they're gonna buy it over the internet, and you'll never police the internet. So I just don't wanna put people out of business, and when you take it away from liquor stores, I mean, they're working hard like anybody else to make a living. If we're gonna allow them to sell liquor, we ought to allow them to sell hemp drinks.
All right, safe travels. Angela Holland, let me hear from the convenience stores. You here still? Okay. Then I got Casey Honeyman, Martin Smith, and Josh Mackey. And let's just try to keep it to 3 to 5 minutes because this is important for us to get the sort of the desires of the people affected in the industries.
I'm still here. How could I leave early on a Friday afternoon knowing it's 5 o'clock somewhere? Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Angela Holland. I serve as the president of the Georgia Association of Convenience Stores, and we represent roughly 2,000 of the 7,000 stores in the state. And our members consist of multi-generational, family-owned operations, as well as larger corporate organizations. So I'm employed to engage and advocate on bills that impact retail convenience stores, not necessarily wholesalers. But this bill, if enacted, would impact our retail members, and so I feel compelled to speak about it. The ink is barely dry in the newly regulated hemp industry. And if I'm not mistaken, the rules and regs were finally published just last month. So since last August, I've shared information with our members regarding the new regulations. We weighed in on the regulations in the fall, and then we look forward to a continued dialogue with the Department of Agriculture. So I've shared the new hemp information numerous times. We've held events, we've published documents from the department, and I still have many members who are in the process of determining whether or not they want to offer hemp products. And that range of participation has been very wide. Just a few weeks ago, I had a retailer ask me if it was legal to sell gummies. While some of my members are testing the waters with a few products, and yet others jumping in with both feet. No matter where they are in the process, they have the option to choose with whom to do business. And I spoke to a member last week who's chosen to purchase hemp consumables from a direct shipper. and beverages through multiple routes. They have stores in different alcohol territories. And so in one territory, they have a great alcohol beverage distributor, and they've chosen that company to distribute their hemp beverages. However, in another one of their territories, they've opted to go in another direction. So this bill prompts me to pick winners and losers amongst our membership who supports our organization. But I'm not here to represent those folks. And given that, I'm here advocating for retailers to have options in this space. And as I thought about the territorial situation, I realized an even more limiting option would be to allow only alcohol beverage distributors to distribute hemp products, as they're not just a three-tier system, but they're a three-tier territorial system. So for those of you who are not familiar with the convenience store industry, we have multiple wholesalers, distributors, and manufacturers who safely bring products to our locations. We have DSD distribution channels, which is direct store delivery, meaning the manufacturer brings us those products. Examples of those are soda pops, bread, chips, dairy products. And then we have fuel distributors, often referred to as jobbers in our industry. And they source and deliver gasoline and products to our stores. And each retailer is free to choose from whom they want to contract and with whom they want to purchase fuel. And then we have grocery wholesalers, and they safely deliver groceries and tobacco. And again, retailers are free to choose from whom they want to purchase their groceries and tobacco. Both the jobber and the grocery wholesaler safely deliver products, and they remit the excise tax required by the state on both fuel and tobacco. And last, we have alcohol beverage wholesalers. And if they choose to sell X brand alcohol beverage, then there's only one wholesaler in their area from which they can choose X brand beverage. Retailers don't get to choose from whom which they purchase alcohol. And that's the differentiating factor between what I refer to as a three-tier system and a three-tier territorial system. So I'm sure there'll be arguments on both sides of the bill, but I believe strongly that whether my members distribute groceries or fuel or alcohol, they all do it responsibly, safely, and they accurately submit their taxes. And as this market develops and expands, I would like to advocate that we allow the ink to dry, see what happens in the marketplace, as free markets typically work themselves out, and if necessary, make legislative and/or regulatory policy changes as needs arise. And I'll take any questions.
All right. Don't see any questions. Thank you. Please don't leave the room. Might think of one after these other testifies. Mr. Honeyman.
All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Casey Honeyman. I'm the Executive Director of the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of Georgia. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Beverage alcohol wholesalers in the state have over 90 years of experience in handling intoxicating beverages and ensuring their safe and responsible distribution to consumers in Georgia. We as wholesalers play a critical role in that process. We are purchasing from reputable licensed suppliers, maintaining a chain of custody as these products move through the channels, and ensure all applicable taxes are paid, but most importantly, delivering clean and unadulterated products to the appropriate licensed Georgia retailers who provide them to the customers. As this new hemp marketplace emerges, we're honored and excited to bring our expertise to the sector. However, we're deeply concerned that this proposed legislation brings an uneven playing field that excludes parties with the most relevant distribution knowledge from this chain. In this building, we often talk about winners and losers, and unfortunately, Senate Bill 229 does just that at the expense of our members. I'm excited to continue to work with all the members on this committee, certainly Chairman Anna Vitarte and most definitely Agriculture Commissioner Harper and his wonderful staff who we've been in contact with since 494 has been passed, to demonstrate our industry's unwavering commitment to public health and safety and our efficiency in managing these products. We stand ready to collaborate to ensure a responsible and safe marketplace for these new, innovative, and intoxicating beverage products. We'll keep it there and be brief. Stand for any questions.
Does your group just, I guess delivers the word, but you wholesale just wine and liquor?
No, sir. So we also have, I'm the wine and spirits wholesalers, and Martin Smith, who unfortunately had a family emergency, could not stick around, as the Georgia Beer Wholesalers Association. And historically, there's a wine and spirits channel and a beer channel. In 2025, in a 21st century economy, we are full service wholesalers. So of my 7 members, 5 of them are also beer distributors. Of his 15 plus members, some of them are in the wine and spirits game as well. But we also, it doesn't stop there. To Angela's point, we're also in the soda aisles as well, waters, energy drinks. If you go into a liquor store or Publix, there are times where our members are distributing those products as well, non-alcoholic products.
So in those big trucks, there might be beer, bourbon, wine, and Coca-Colas.
Yeah, when you drive down the road and you see a Tito's truck or a Jack Daniel's truck, a Budweiser truck drive by, that's just a big billboard driving by. But on the inside of that, there's probably 100 to 500 different SKUs in there, from your favorite wines to your craft beer that we're getting out to the marketplace, to Scotch whiskey coming over from Scotland or anything. Yes, sir.
So those trucks might be stopping at a grocery store that sells beer, a convenience store that sells beer and wine and hemp beverages, and also a liquor store that might be selling your liquor and beer and wine.
That's right, yep. And our wine and spirits wholesalers really specialize in the liquor channel and the grocery channel as well. Martin's members are specialists in this CNG or convenience and gas channel, but no, that's what we're doing. We're experts in these channels and making sure that we're getting products from licensed suppliers. They're coming to us, licensed wholesalers, out to licensed retailers. That chain of custody, the taxation, the collection of all that, public health and safety, there's a check and balance for each one of those. That's why it's the system works as well as it does. And I think as the hemp world gets stood up, we're very excited about this. We're very excited to continue to work with Commissioner Harper. He's done a great job in terms of putting his arms around this industry. And yesterday when we were talking about hemp, I think it was a comment made about just the burgeoning industry and how much it's growing and taking off, and his willingness to continue to work with us there. So we're excited about that.
So I don't think he's done it in the committee yet, but in private meetings with me, he and his counsel have explained the licensing process for hemp that's handled through the Ag Department. Are your wholesalers licensed wholesalers to deliver those products, or do you have to obtain a license? And if so, are your 7 people licensed?
Yes, sir. So of my 7, I believe 5 members are either actively licensing and distributing today, or have actively applied and waiting to get that license. So of the 5, I would say 4 are in the market, and 1 is probably just awaiting final approval from the department. But we're looking at this as an exciting opportunity that needs the proper guardrails for sure, that we're excited to continue working on.
So I don't see the retailers here today. Is Tony here? But my understanding is liquor stores are not able to sell hemp-based products, beverages or otherwise. Do you know the ruling on that?
Yes, sir. There's a Department of Revenue rule. I believe it's 560.23.04 that lists what a liquor store is allowed to sell. Currently, today, the hemp drinks or the Delta 9 products, if it's not a vape product, fall outside of that rule, so they're not actively allowed to sell. So I think the conflation between Chairman Summers and Chairman Anna Vitarte's bill is Chairman Summers is talking about getting these products into packaged liquor stores. This bill today, 229, contemplates removing us as beverage alcohol wholesalers to have the ability to get these products at all to the marketplace, no matter where that is.
Prevents you from distributing them.
That's right. Yes,
His
sir.
deals with allowing the retailers to sell it.
Yes, his just would allow them to sell it. So hopefully we can continue to working with Chairman Anna Vitarte on this measure. So because we feel like we're experts in this field, and to cut us out of this would be I think we'd be losing out as a state.
All right. So without this bill, it is possible for you to distribute, I'll call it, hemp products, and y'all are doing some if you have the license?
Not alcoholic hemp products. We cannot do that. TTB has indicated that as soon as you put alcohol in hemp or THC with any type of, you cannot mix those two. But if there's a Delta 9 hemp Farm Bill approved seltzer, our folks are getting the necessary licenses with the Department of Agriculture to be in that space.
I didn't mean them mixed together.
Oh, sorry, okay. I misunderstood.
That truck you're talking
Yes,
about
sir.
today can deliver
Commingled,
Delta
yeah.
9 products with seltzer or liquor products if you're adequately licensed in both fields, so to speak.
Yeah, that's my understanding,
Okay,
yes.
mine too.
Yeah.
All right, other questions from committee members? We're trying to get our heads around this before the train leaves the station. All righty. Martin Smith is not here. He's with the beer wholesalers, but his colleague, Skin Edge, is here.
Mr. Chairman,
All
Mr.
right.
Smith asked me to deliver his remarks. He did get called away on a family emergency, so I'll be very brief. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, even before Senate Bill 494 passed last year, the wholesalers we represent have been hearing from manufacturers of hemp products who want to work with us to distribute their products. The Hemp Beverage Alliance, CABA, the list goes on. And I can't tell you how refreshing it is to be down here talking about manufacturers who are excited to partner with us for a change. Producers want to work with us because they understand the role we play in the beverage alcohol industry today. They understand the experience and expertise we have. They see the infrastructure we have in place and the relationships that we have in the intoxicating beverage marketplace. They want to be on our trucks, and they want their products to be marketed and sold in the same way as alcohol is. We are not here to advocate for any specific company or type of company to be prohibited from distributing consumable hemp beverages. To the contrary, there is room for others to be involved, but there's also no reason to cut out alcohol distributors. As Mr. Honeyman said, alcohol distributors have 90 years of experience. In a brand-new industry like consumable hemp, that experience and our proven record of ensuring public health and safety can only be beneficial to everyone involved, and we look forward to continuing the conversation with Senator Anafitarte and others. Thank you. Be glad to take any questions.
Any questions? All right, thank you. Last speaker, Mr. Josh Mackey. Hate to save you till last, Josh, but you signed up last.
I'll buy beer for everyone after.
All
Josh Mackey, speaking on behalf of the Georgia Craft Brewers Guild. We are in support of this bill. We think it makes it clear that wholesalers in the alcohol industry should be focused on beer and alcohol and not other new types of product. Craft brewing in Georgia is at a crossroads. We had 16 breweries closed just last year, and I can promise you we are going to have more closed this year. Functionally, new craft breweries that are opening in the last couple of years are being cut off from the marketplace. Wholesalers are deciding that they don't want to take on new Georgia craft brands. As you mentioned earlier, there's a truck and there's only so much space on it, and our new craft breweries, we're not on that truck. Long-standing Georgia craft breweries are seeing a decline in the amount of beer that is being ordered by beer wholesalers. These things and these decisions are not happening in a vacuum. They're happening in part because wholesalers are now taking on new products like hemp beverages. As Ben has alluded to in the conversation earlier during this committee, on the front end, hemp and alcohol can't be mixed. We currently have a status in Georgia that liquor stores can't sell them. But in the middle, they're together and on that truck, to the detriment of Georgia companies that are brewing craft beer.
So you're getting squeezed out of the trucks by the hemp?
Yes, absolutely.
No room on the truck for craft beers and the hemp beverages?
That seems to be the case, as they are turning down. We had a craft brewery here today that would have testified on the other bill that would have told everybody, they've asked three wholesalers to take them on, and they've been turned down by all three of them. Another brewer that was here today spoke earlier this week and would have said, my wholesaler canceled our agreement and I can't get a new one. Can't move a keg, can't move anything a block away to a restaurant. Meanwhile, the largest beer wholesaler in the state has 12 hemp beverage brands already that they're promoting. So I would say that there's a squeeze on us. We think it's important. It seems to us that the standard is that these things are separate, hemp and alcohol. We're asking for the same standard, and we think it'll help the wholesalers refocus on Georgia craft beer.
This may sound like a dumb question, but I'll take the chance, revealing my ignorance. The wholesalers buy the product from the manufacturers and then they sell it downstream, or are they simply taking orders for the retailers and passing them on to the manufacturer?
Yes, they purchase the product at a price, and then they sell it to the retailers
They
at a
take a
price.
risk. If they buy the wrong product, they can't sell it. They can't
Yes,
unload it.
there's specifics of that agreement that I'm not an expert on,
Okay.
but yes.
So they're your customer, other than the ones that visit your breweries and, taste and take up to their case home a day, then you're marketing to these beer wholesalers generally.
They're the only customer and the only access to the greater market.
Okay, and they're responsible for doing the marketing downstream to the retailer?
Both do. A lot of breweries and wholesalers have agreements that they will co-market the products.
Got it.
I hear oftentimes from our compatriots and our partners and wholesalers that they go out and sell the product, and they do go out there and sell the product. But a lot of breweries have agreements where they will employ salespeople too to go help the wholesaler sell the product that they now possess. Both of those are true.
Sorry if I stopped your flow there. You were
Oh, no.
rolling pretty good. Continue.
No,
Just
that was
wanna
it.
make sure. Okay, you good? Anybody else got questions? Okay. Preacher lady, you got a question? Preacher Senator? Okay. Senator Adam Vitarte, would you like to kind of wrap up?
I mean, I don't know what else you want me to say. I think we've said our piece.
Well,
I mean, this is
sometimes when
pretty
you-
simple.
After
Yeah.
hearing testimony, sometimes you kind of want to respond. I'm not making you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I've said before, I mean, I think there's a standard here that I think needs to be addressed, a standard that needs to be protected, and I think we need to protect Georgia businesses over out-of-state businesses.
Georgia Department of Revenue, Austin, y'all got anything to add or preferences? You're here to do what we suggest.
I'm aggressively neutral.
All right, I like that. Okay, Senator, do you want us to try to take action today, or you rather continue the discussion?
Only if we're going to pass a bill.
I'm thinking this probably needs to be fleshed out a little bit more, and I've lost some folks here. And because I know there's other legislation coming from the House, and that we're kind of in the early stages of this new product line distribution, I recommend you hold, but if you feel froggy, let us know. We'll see. Anybody on the committee got strong preferences whether you want to deal with this today or not? All right. In that case, I think the prudent move, I like how deliberative this committee is, and we'd like to be well informed before we make these major policy decisions. So I think we'll hold action on your bill, but I appreciate your hard work on it, your presentation, and we will stand adjourned. Y'all have a great. That's a good thing. He just reflected on the fact that some members of the committee are smarter than they look. We're adjourned.